I'm not sure why I'm writing this. Maybe guilt has finally broken me. I thought I was doing the right thing, or at least the lesser of two evils. But after everything, I don't know anymore. This will sound like I'm accusing my wife of something monstrous. It will make me seem unhinged. The details will be fragmented, but I promise there's a reason for that. Every piece of this story is necessary. Every moment I recount will lead you to what she has become. If anyone connected to this horror is reading this, I know you don't want an apology. You want an explanation. Here it is. Started on our wedding night. A simple question. One so out of place in the glow of our celebration that I thought it was a joke. I even laughed, but she didn't. Not even a smile. Her face was utterly still, her expression vacant. A mannequin. The air around her seemed to shift, heavy with something unfamiliar. My mind screamed stranger. Sophia. My Sophia. The woman I'd loved for 5 years. Felt like a stranger. I tried to push the unease aside. Too much champagne, I told myself. Then she asked again, her voice devoid of warmth. Can you sleep out on the third Sunday of the month? I sobered up instantly. The phrasing was strange. Too deliberate. Too calculated. I straightened in bed, watching her closely. She was brilliant, graduated at the top of her class at Purdue. She knew exactly what she was asking, and that's what disturbed me. The first question that came to mind was why, but instead of asking, I simply said, "Of course, honey." She stood, slipping into her silk robe and stepping into the slippers placed neatly on the plush carpet of our hotel suite. The candlelight flickered as she moved, her dark hair absorbing the dim glow. Even in that eerie moment, she was breathtaking. "I need you to promise," she whispered. For the first month of our marriage, everything was perfect. We were inseparable. We had date nights every evening. We finished each other's sentences, and we never fought. Not once. Even the intimacy was intoxicating. We lived in a honeymoon dream until June 16th, Father's Day, the third Sunday of the month. We had just returned from dinner with my parents. It had been an incredible day, one of the happiest I'd ever seen her. Her laughter had been infectious, her smile radiant. That all changed when we walked through our front door. I had just dropped my keys on the counter when a voice cut through the darkness. "What are you doing?" It was sharp, a voice I didn't recognize at first. I turned. Sophia stood in the shadowed archway to the living room, her long hair obscuring most of her face. Only one eye was visible, gleaming through the strands, a piercing, predatory gray. My stomach nodded. "Jesus, babe, turn on a light or two." I chuckled nervously, stepping toward the switch beside her. Her gaze tracked my every movement, unblinking. I flicked the switch. The room flooded with light, banishing the dark figure. But something had changed. Her hair was different, tucked neatly behind her ears, as if she had shifted somehow, become someone else entirely in the blink of an eye. I swallowed the unease and kissed her cheek. Her skin was freezing. She didn't move, didn't react, but she did react to the light. Not in a natural way, more like she didn't understand it, like the very concept of light was foreign to her. "I didn't have anything planned," I said cautiously, answering her initial question. "Just an early night." Her lips parted. "I didn't think it would take this long to forget your promise." I froze. Then I remembered. The wedding night. The question. "Can you sleep out on the third Sunday of the month?" Oh, I exhaled. "Yeah, I guess I forgot. Sorry, babe. Can we start next month?" Her face went blank again. That terrifying, mannequin-like emptiness. It was the same expression she'd worn that first night. The expression that made me feel like I was speaking to someone who only looked like my wife. "Look, why do I even have to go?" I asked, the unease creeping into my voice. Her lip curled slightly, not in anger, in something worse, disgust. "Get out," she hissed. "What?" "Get the fuck out. Now." Her voice tore through the air like a blade, shrill and venomous. The only time I'd ever heard her raise her voice was in court during prosecution cases. And even then, it had been controlled, firm, authoritative. This was something else entirely. This was wrong. She screamed it again, and again. I backed away, my hands lifted in surrender, fear coiling in my chest. I grabbed my keys and stumbled out the door, slamming it shut behind me. Looking back, I almost wish a neighbor had called the cops, because if they had, maybe they would have found them. The ones already locked in our basement. I spent the night in a Walmart parking lot, unable to sleep. My mind was a tornado of questions. What the hell had just happened? That wasn't my wife. Couldn't have been. But I would go back. Of course I would. Because love makes you ignore red flags the size of billboards. Because deep down, I still believed that the woman I married was in there. Somewhere. I just didn't know that I was already too late. After spending so much time with my wife, I eventually recognized a clear sign that she was lying. As a lawyer, deception came naturally to her. It was simply one of her many skills. I never held it against her. As long as she wasn't lying to me, we were fine. You might be wondering, if she lies so often, how can you be sure she isn't lying to you? I understand why it sounds questionable. But the answer lies in a small, almost imperceptible habit of hers, her head tilt. Every time she lies, she tilts her head slightly. Most people wouldn't even notice, as the movement is brief and subtle. It was amusing to watch her tell small, harmless lies, like pretending not to know a coupon's expiration date when speaking to a cashier or claiming to be busy when her parents invited her to dinner. She often told minor, inconsequential lies, and each time, that familiar head tilt preceded them. It seemed that I was the only one who had picked up on this pattern. Her parents, friends, and colleagues remained oblivious. But then I saw her lie in court, and suddenly, it wasn't so harmless anymore. This time, a man's life was at stake. If he lost the case, he would face the death penalty. A crucial piece of evidence surfaced unexpectedly. The defense attorney scoffed at the notion of allowing evidence that hadn't been disclosed during discovery. However, the judge ruled in favor of its admission due to its relevance. Even as a bailiff, I recognized what a bold and risky move that was, entirely dependent on the judge's mood. "When did you come across this evidence? And why didn't you present it sooner?" The judge asked the prosecution with a measured tone, clearly unwilling to make things too easy for Sophia. A small smile tugged at my lips. Sophia thrived under pressure, especially when backed into a corner. I was eager to see how she would navigate her way out of this. Then, ever so slightly, her head tilted to the right. The smile faded from my lips, and I blinked, needing to make sure I wasn't imagining things. But there it was, her head tilted slightly to the right, a subtle smile playing on her lips as she gazed at the judge with those storm gray eyes. I was called into forensics last night around 9. The lead crime scene investigator had just returned from vacation earlier that day and immediately went back to work. I don't know how he pulled it off, but I suppose all it took was a second pair of experienced eyes. I was certain about the head tilt, but what exactly was she lying about? Even the lead CSI testified in support of her claims. That unexpected, game-changing revelation had sealed the case. The jury found the defendant guilty, sentencing him to death by lethal injection. I didn't know how, but after watching Sophia deceive the judge, I knew, deep in my gut, that the man was innocent. The argument that erupted at home later that night felt eerily similar to the one we had months ago, the first time she kicked me out of our house. Only this time, I was the one who started it. "What the hell was that?" I demanded, my voice sharp with anger. She turned to face me as we stepped into the kitchen, smoothly sliding her coat off her shoulders. "You've never seen a battle like that in court before, have you?" she teased, flashing a smirk and a wink. "The defense never saw it coming." Oh, I'm sure they didn't. The temperature in the room plummeted, and it wasn't just in my head. It dropped so fast that I instinctively glanced at the thermostat. 70 degrees. Then why did the place suddenly feel like a freezer? That's when I realized the cold wasn't coming from the air. It was coming from her. Sophia stood there, staring at me with narrowed eyes, dressed in her deep wine-colored office suit. I would have preferred seeing her outright furious rather than the eerie blank expression she wore every third Sunday of the month. Swallowing the unease creeping up my throat, I pressed on. "I know what I saw." She took a slow step toward me, her gaze darkening as she traced her fingertips along the kitchen counter. "And what exactly do you think you saw, bailiff?" she asked, my title rolling off her tongue like something rotten. She was baiting me, trying to back me into a corner. She wanted to dig into my thoughts, twist them, and use them against me. The moment I revealed my hand, she would tear it apart, just as she had done to countless defense arguments before. "Seriously? You're pulling your courtroom tactics on me? I'm not some lawyer for you to destroy. I'm your damn husband," I snapped. "Fine. If you want to pretend that an innocent man won't be executed because of the bullshit you pulled today, go ahead. But don't bring that lawyer crap into our home." She sneered at me like I was nothing more than gum stuck to the bottom of her shoe. Something cold, disgusting, and unworthy of notice. "Innocent," she scoffed. "You don't know the first thing about innocence. As far as I'm concerned, you're all guilty." With that, she walked away. We didn't speak for the rest of the night. I slept on the couch. Not because she made me, but because I couldn't bring myself to lie beside whatever thing had brought that bitter cold into our home. It wasn't my wife. Not anymore. A few weeks after our argument about her lying in court, we entered our first cold shoulder phase. Our home, once filled with laughter and warmth, became nothing more than a hollow shell of what it used to be. No matter how high I set the thermostat, the air always felt cold, and it always seemed to radiate from her. Conversations dwindled, reduced to routine discussions about work since we shared the same courtroom. Meals were eaten in silence, the only sound being the scrape of utensils against plates. Sometimes, she would come home and go straight to bed without bothering to eat. Other nights, she would lock herself in her office for hours. I often wondered what she did in there. From the faint tapping sounds I could hear, I assumed she was typing away on her computer. When we did sleep in the same bed, one of us would always sneak in later, avoiding the inevitable discomfort of sharing the same space. One evening, she admitted she was at her breaking point. She blamed work, saying the stress was overwhelming and she needed a vacation. But I knew better. She was talking about me. I had expected her to include me in those plans, but she didn't. Instead, she went on a girls' trip to Miami. I braced myself for the inevitable late-night text telling me she'd met someone at a club, confirming my suspicions. Looking back, I almost wished it had happened. At least then, I could have filed for divorce and kept my sanity. Her trip lasted a week. I was supposed to pick her up from the airport, but exhaustion from working back-to-back shifts got the better of me. By the time I woke up, the room was dark, and I groggily reached for my phone. Her plane had landed 2 hours ago. Shit. I unlocked my screen to find dozens of angry texts and several missed calls. And honestly, she had every right to be pissed. How the hell had I managed to sleep through my alarm and forget to pick up my own wife? I had hoped that this trip might help mend things between us, but it seemed we were already off to a bad start. Just as I swung my legs out of bed, a knock echoed through the room. My stomach dropped. Another knock. louder this time. This wasn't the usual creaks and groans of the house settling. I carefully placed one foot onto the carpet, moving with deliberate caution to avoid making the wooden floorboards creak. My fingers slid into the nightstand drawer, wrapping around the grip of my pistol. Think, Jack. Sophia's home. She probably lost her keys and is knocking on the front door. But this knock wasn't coming from the front door. It was coming from my bedroom door. A slow chill crawled down my spine. Who the hell knocks on a bedroom door? Pressing my ear against the wood, I strained to hear anything, breathing, movement, anything at all. Silence, absolute and unnerving. Then another knock, hard enough to make the wood vibrate beneath my ear. I stumbled backward, my pulse thundering in my ears. I held my breath, listening. Nothing. A soft exhale left my lips, visible in the freezing air. I really need to get the heating checked. Who's there? My voice cracked. I wasn't sure what answer I expected, what burglar would actually announce themselves. Deep down, I was hoping for something normal, something rational, but there was no voice. Instead, I heard the unmistakable sound of skittering feet, quick, erratic movements just beyond the door. It didn't sound like one person. It sounded like many, or worse, like something with too many legs. Fuck this, I muttered under my breath, gripping the doorknob. Every ounce of instinct screamed at me not to open that door. My fingers trembled. If I heard that, then so did whatever was outside. I pushed the door open. The hallway was empty. At least that's what I thought. The darkness was thick. Anything could have been lurking within it. The cold air hit me like a wave, seeping through my sweatpants and sweater, but I didn't dare step forward. A light switch was only a few feet away, but to reach it, I'd have to leave the safety of my bedroom and step into whatever was waiting in the shadows. By the time I finished debating with myself, my eyes had adjusted. The darkness peeled back just enough to reveal a silhouette standing in the hallway. My breath hitched. Sophia? My voice trembled. I had spoken her name, which meant part of me believed it was her. So why did my grip on the gun tighten? Because my brain was trying to rationalize what I was seeing. It was telling me that this was my wife, fresh off her flight home. But my instincts knew better. The figure began to turn. Slowly, unnaturally slow. Baby, I'm sorry. I slammed the door shut. My heart pounded against my ribs as if it were trying to escape my chest. That wasn't Sophia. It had too many legs. And its face. God, why did its face stretch like that? A million questions raced through my mind, but they were drowned out by the sound of violent pounding against the door. The knocking didn't stop this time. It grew more aggressive, rattling the wood as if something was throwing itself against it. A thin crack splintered down the middle. It's going to break through. Get the fuck out, I shouted. More pounding. Another crack. I'm warning you. Then knocks from everywhere. The closet, the window, even the walls. Stop it, I screamed, flipping the safety off my gun. I won't ask again. God damn it. Bang, 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 bang. My finger hovered over the trigger. A hand grabbed my shoulder. I spun around, ready to fire, but a voice stopped me cold. Jack, I froze. Sophia stood there, eyes wide with fear. She reached for the gun, lowering it with a gentle but firm grip. Baby, what's going on? Her brows furrowed, her storm gray eyes filled with concern. Put the gun away. Slowly, I flipped the safety back on. My hands were shaking. What the hell just happened? It all felt so real. The cold, the knocks, the thing in the hallway. But then she pulled me into an embrace, her warmth grounding me in a way that made me second-guess everything. Sophia, I murmured. It wasn't really a question. more like a desperate attempt to convince myself she was real, that this was real, that I hadn't just almost shot my own wife. She tilted her head, ever so slightly. "Yeah, it's me, baby," she whispered, guiding me toward the bed. "Come back to bed." As I lay down, my gaze drifted to the bedroom door. The spiderweb of cracks still covered the wood. The number of missing persons in my hometown is nearly double the national average. Here, people vanish as if it were a competitive sport. Our population hovers around 20,000, yet last year alone, 28 residents disappeared. That may not seem like much, but over the previous 5 years, 91 people went missing, almost 1% of the town. And that doesn't even include those later found or whose remains surfaced, which would push the number closer to 3%. The highest single-year disappearance count was 66. That record was set in the town's founding year when it was still a mining community. Historians blame a supposed mine collapse, but oddly, no such incident is mentioned in any local records. More recently, my neighbors raised the missing count to 31 in October. An elderly couple vanished, exactly when remains unclear. They rarely left home, with the bedridden husband receiving home care. No visitors, no family. The only activity at their house was the landscaper mowing the lawn. I couldn't say if they had been gone for weeks or months. Exactly what I told the detectives who questioned me and my wife. Investigators were convinced they disappeared in late September, which seemed unlikely. They had no vehicle and the wife used a walker. Even stranger, their healthcare worker also went missing. 3 people gone without a trace. A patrol officer mentioned the woods, but a higher-up quickly shut him down. Every local horror story points to the woods. People blame something lurking there for the disappearances, though no one has seen it. After what happened last year, I started paying attention. A woman was found in the woods, gagged and chained, with strange brands burned into her skin. The man discovered with her met a grislier fate. Only half of his body remained. Not a clean slice across the waist, but a perfect separation, as if someone snapped a Kit Kat in half. No tool could have cut so precisely. The other half was never found. When police urged the woman to speak, she couldn't. Her vocal cords had been replaced with hay. A week later, despite 24/7 surveillance, she was found hanging from a tree near where she had been rescued. An autopsy revealed something even more disturbing. One half of her body had been swapped with the missing half of the dead man. Yet, the doctor who had initially examined her swore she had been intact before. I never paid much mind to the ramblings of those claiming creatures lurked in the woods. Not every act of evil requires a monster. I have no rational explanation for the disappearances or the horrors that unfolded last year, but I'm certain it isn't some deranged clown. My wife, however, absorbs every word. It doesn't matter if the storyteller is a vagrant or a child. If they have something to say about the missing or the woods, she listens with unwavering attention. I wasn't entirely honest when I told the police I knew nothing about my neighbor's disappearance. But telling them the full truth would have made me sound insane, especially in front of my wife. My sanity is the last weapon I have against her. If I lose that, it's over. Read this and you'll understand. We were on our usual weekend grocery run, a small tradition we managed to protect from our demanding jobs. As a prosecutor, Sophia wasn't always guaranteed time off, but working in the courthouse granted me the luxury of Saturdays and Sundays. After her Miami trip, things between us had improved. We slipped right back into the rhythm of enjoying each other's company. I maneuvered the shopping cart through the aisles, scanning the store for my wife. If we wanted to get home in time to cook dinner before our show, Jersey Shore of all things, we needed to leave immediately. That woman has a knack for disappearing the second you look away. I swear she could teleport. Eventually, I spotted her by the deli counter, bent slightly at the waist, deep in conversation with a young blonde woman. As I approached, I could already tell what was happening. Another story. Another stranger telling Sophia exactly what she wanted to hear. I rolled my eyes. Something about an imposing faceless woman with hair similar to my wife's enticing her into the woods. I'm not sure why my wife entertained this nonsense. For someone who only deals in facts, she really enjoys her superstition. As the young girl recounted what I assumed was some sort of nightmare, my wife remained motionless. She didn't even appear to be breathing. Her expression, which was blank and mannequin-like, is what tensed me up. "Are you who I saw in the woods?" The girl whispers from behind her hands. Maybe my wife grins. "What's going to happen to me if I go into the woods?" "The same thing that'll happen to Mr. and Mrs. Bennett." "Our neighbors? What happened to them?" My wife arose to her full stature. "We can show you," she finishes with a smile. "We won't be doing anything because we are not in the business of scaring pretty little girls like yourself." I interject, ruffling the girl's hair. I shoot my wife a look, but she was still staring blankly at the girl. "Run off to Mama now." I grin and wave at the girl, who rushes into the arms of her equally blonde mother. I turn back to my wife, my expression displaying annoyance. "Let's leave the scare tactics for the defense, prosecutor," I beseeched. We hurried home from the grocery shop and prepared dinner in time to watch the last of Jersey Shore. Even yet, the show and dinner weren't as relaxed as they usually were. Even though my lovely wife was cuddled up in my arms, my thoughts were elsewhere. The seemingly innocuous reference to our neighbors. Why did she talk to that child in such a serious manner? I did not notice a single head tilt. Whatever. Given that it was the third Sunday of the month, I had the entire day tomorrow to think about it. I'll be out hiking with a handful of friends upstate. If she wants to have the entire house to herself, I don't care.